Here is your complete storytelling video script. Have you ever met someone who seemed to have everything in the world, yet carried a sadness so deep that money could never heal it? What if the person who changed their life forever wasn't another billionaire, a famous doctor, or a powerful politician, but a struggling single dad mechanic who could barely pay his bills? Before we begin this heartwarming story, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and what kindness means to you. Welcome to Kindness Paradise, where every story reminds us that one act of kindness can change a life forever. Rachel Morgan was one of the richest women in America. She owned a successful technology company, appeared on magazine covers, and traveled in private jets. To the world, she seemed unstoppable. People admired her success and dreamed of living her life. But behind the expensive clothes and bright smiles was a woman carrying a painful burden. For months, Rachel had been secretly battling a serious heart condition. Her doctors had arranged a specialized surgery in another state. The procedure offered hope, but it was risky. On the morning of her flight, Rachel sat alone in her luxury car outside a private airport. Her hands trembled. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I can't go," she whispered. For the first time in years, fear completely overwhelmed her. She wasn't afraid of losing her wealth. She wasn't afraid of losing her company. She was afraid of never coming back. The driver waited quietly. After several minutes, Rachel told him to take her home. As they drove through the city, the car suddenly began making strange noises. Moments later, it broke down on a quiet road. The driver called for assistance, and within 30 minutes a local mechanic arrived in an old pickup truck. His name was Daniel Carter. Daniel was a single father raising his 10-year-old daughter, Emma. Life had not been easy for him. His wife had passed away years earlier, leaving him to balance work, parenting, and endless responsibilities on his own. Still, despite his struggles, Daniel always greeted people with a smile. He quickly examined the vehicle and discovered the problem. "It'll take about an hour to fix," he said kindly. Rachel nodded but barely spoke. Daniel noticed her red eyes. Most people would have ignored it. But Daniel wasn't most people. "Rough day?" he asked gently. Rachel looked away. Normally she never shared personal matters with strangers. But something about Daniel felt different. Maybe it was his calm voice. Maybe it was the kindness in his eyes. Or maybe she was simply exhausted from carrying her fears alone. "I'm supposed to have surgery today," she admitted. Daniel paused. "Are you okay?" Rachel laughed bitterly. "No. I'm terrified." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel sat beside her on a nearby bench. "You know," he said, "when my wife got sick, I was scared every day." Rachel listened quietly. "I couldn't control what happened. I couldn't fix it. But I learned something important." "What was that?" Rachel asked. Daniel smiled softly. "We don't have to be fearless to move forward. Sometimes courage is just taking the next step even when you're scared." His words settled deep inside her heart. No doctor had said anything that touched her the way those simple words did. Just then, a young girl ran toward them carrying 2 cups of lemonade. It was Emma. She had come with her father after school. "Hi," she said brightly. She handed 1 cup to Rachel. Rachel reached for her purse. "How much do I owe you?" Emma shook her head. "Nothing." Rachel looked surprised. Emma smiled. "Dad says kindness isn't something you sell." The words hit Rachel harder than she expected. For years, people had wanted something from her. Business deals, investments, favors. Yet this little girl offered kindness with no expectation at all. As the afternoon passed, Rachel found herself talking with Daniel and Emma. For the first time in months, she laughed. She forgot about stock prices, meetings, and medical reports. She simply enjoyed being around genuine people. Eventually, the repair was finished. Rachel stood beside the car. She knew it was time to leave. But before getting inside, she turned to Daniel. "Thank you," she said, "for fixing the car." Rachel shook her head. "For much more than that." Then she looked at Emma. "And thank you for the lemonade." Emma grinned. "Good luck." Rachel smiled. Something inside her had changed. An hour later, she was back at the airport. The fear was still there. But now she remembered Daniel's words. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite it. Rachel boarded the plane. The surgery took several hours. Friends, employees, and family members waited anxiously. When the doctors finally emerged, they delivered wonderful news. The procedure had been successful. Rachel was going to recover. Weeks later, as she regained her strength, she couldn't stop thinking about Daniel and Emma. They had no idea how much they had helped her. One afternoon, Rachel decided to visit their repair shop. The building was small and worn. Inside, Daniel was working beneath a truck. When he saw Rachel, he smiled. "Looks like you made it." Rachel laughed. "Thanks to you." Over the following months, an unexpected friendship grew between them. Rachel learned more about their lives. She discovered that Daniel's shop struggled financially. The roof leaked whenever it rained. Old equipment constantly broke down. Yet Daniel never complained. Instead, he focused on helping customers and raising Emma. Rachel wanted to do something, but she didn't want charity to embarrass him. So she quietly arranged for new equipment to be delivered to the shop. She funded repairs to the building anonymously. Business improved. Customers increased. The shop finally began thriving. Months later, Daniel discovered who had helped. He drove straight to Rachel's office. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. Rachel smiled. "Because kindness isn't something you sell." Daniel laughed. Emma's words had come full circle. Years later, Rachel often shared the story in interviews. People expected her to talk about business strategies or investment secrets. Instead, she spoke about a mechanic and his daughter. She explained how a simple conversation changed her life during her darkest moment. She reminded people that kindness doesn't require wealth. It doesn't require power. It doesn't require perfect circumstances. Sometimes it is simply listening to someone who feels alone. Sometimes it is offering encouragement. Sometimes it is giving a free cup of lemonade to a stranger who needs hope. The greatest gift we can offer another person is often our compassion. And the beautiful thing about kindness is that it never stops with one person. It spreads. Rachel's life touched Daniel's. Daniel's kindness touched Rachel's. Emma's generosity inspired them both. And together, they created a chain of goodness that continued for years. So the next time you have an opportunity to show kindness, don't underestimate its power. You never know who may be carrying a hidden burden. You never know whose life may change because of a few caring words. And you never know how one small act of kindness might come back to change your own life forever. Because in the end, kindness is not measured by the size of the gift. It is measured by the size of the heart that gives it. This script is approximately 1,000 words and designed for an emotional, engaging YouTube storytelling narration. I've written the script in a narrator style, without headings, with a stronger emotional hook and storytelling flow. Please, turn the car around. The female billionaire's voice cracked as tears streamed down her face. Just minutes away from the airport, she stared out the window and whispered the words again. "I can't go." She had everything most people could only dream of: money, success, luxury homes, and a company worth billions. Yet on that heartbreaking morning, none of it could give her the courage she desperately needed. What happened next would change her life forever, and the person who helped her wasn't another billionaire, a famous doctor, or a powerful leader. It was a struggling single dad mechanic who had every reason to give up on life but chose kindness instead. Before we begin this touching story, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and leave a comment below. Let us know where you're watching from and what kindness means to you. Welcome to Kindness Paradise, where every story reminds us that one simple act of kindness can change a life forever. Rachel Bennett was one of the most successful women in America. At just 42 years old, she owned a technology company that employed thousands of people. Her face appeared on business magazines, television interviews, and social media posts seen by millions. People looked at Rachel and saw confidence. They saw power. They saw success. But nobody saw the fear hidden behind her smile. For almost a year, Rachel had been fighting a serious heart condition. The doctors had finally found a treatment that could save her life, but it required a risky surgery at a specialized hospital across the country. The morning of her flight, she sat in the backseat of her luxury car on the way to the airport. The closer they got, the more terrified she became. What if something went wrong? What if she never came home? What if this was the last day of her life? The fear felt heavier than anything she had ever carried. Then suddenly she spoke, turned the car around. The driver looked surprised. I can't do it. I can't go." Just as he prepared to turn around, the vehicle began making strange noises. Moments later, It rolled to a stop on a quiet road outside the city. The driver called for roadside assistance. About 30 minutes later, an old pickup truck pulled up beside them. A mechanic stepped out. His name was Daniel Carter. Daniel wore faded jeans and grease-stained work boots. Life had not been kind to him. 5 years earlier, he had lost his wife to cancer. Since then, he had been raising his daughter Emma alone while working long hours at a small repair shop. Money was always tight. Some months were harder than others. But despite everything, Daniel never stopped believing in kindness. As he inspected the vehicle, he noticed Rachel sitting quietly with tears in her eyes. Most people would have pretended not to notice. Daniel couldn't. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Rachel wiped her face. "I'll be fine." Daniel nodded politely and returned to work. A few minutes later, he walked back over. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes when people say they'll be fine, that's when they need someone to listen the most." Rachel looked at him. Something about his voice felt sincere. For months she had hidden her fears from everyone. Yet suddenly she found herself opening up to a complete stranger. She told him about the surgery. She told him about her fear. And for the first time, she admitted how scared she really was. Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished speaking, he sat beside her on a nearby curb. "I understand fear," he said. Rachel looked at him curiously. "When my wife was sick, I spent years being afraid. Afraid of losing her. Afraid of raising our daughter alone. Afraid of the future." Rachel listened carefully. "So how did you get through it?" she asked. Daniel smiled sadly. "I stopped trying to control tomorrow and focused on doing the next right thing today." Rachel thought about those words. The next right thing. Not the entire future. Just the next step. Before she could respond, a cheerful voice interrupted them. "Dad!" A little girl ran toward them carrying a small paper bag. It was Emma. She had just finished school and stopped by the repair truck. Emma noticed Rachel immediately. Without hesitation, she pulled out a homemade cookie from the bag. "This is for you," she said. Rachel smiled. "Oh, thank you. How much do I owe you?" Emma looked confused. "Oh me." Rachel laughed softly. "The cookie." Emma shook her head. "My dad says kindness isn't something people buy." Rachel felt something warm in her chest. For years she had lived in a world where almost everything had a price. But this little girl was offering kindness freely. No expectations. No hidden motives. Just simple human kindness. As the repair continued, Rachel spent time talking with Daniel and Emma. They shared stories. They laughed. For the first time in weeks, Rachel forgot about her fears. When the car was finally repaired, Daniel handed the keys to the driver. "We are all set." Rachel stood beside the car. She looked at Daniel. Then at Emma. And suddenly tears filled her eyes again. But this time they were different. These weren't tears of fear. They were tears of gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel smiled. "For fixing the car." Rachel shook her head. "For reminding me that courage still exists." An hour later, Rachel arrived at the airport. She was still afraid. The surgery was still dangerous. Nothing had changed about the situation. But something had changed inside her. She remembered Daniel's words. The next right thing. Boarding the plane was the next right thing. So she did. The surgery lasted nearly 7 hours. Family members, friends, and co-workers waited anxiously for news. Finally, a surgeon stepped into the waiting room with a smile. The operation had been successful. Rachel was going to recover. During the months that followed, Rachel often thought about Daniel and Emma. She realized that a stranger's kindness had helped save her in ways medicine never could. So after recovering, she decided to visit their repair shop. What she found broke her heart. The building needed repairs. The equipment was old. Business was struggling. Yet Daniel greeted every customer with the same kindness he had shown her. Rachel decided to help. Quietly and anonymously. New equipment arrived. The roof was repaired. The shop received upgrades that Daniel could never have afforded. Business slowly improved. Customers increased. For the first time in years, Daniel no longer worried about losing everything. Eventually, he discovered who had helped him. One afternoon he visited Rachel's office. "Why?" he asked. Rachel smiled. "Because someone once reminded me that kindness matters." Daniel laughed. "You didn't have to do all this." "Maybe not," Rachel replied. "But kindness grows when we pass it on." Years later, Rachel would tell that story during speeches and interviews. People expected her to share business advice. Instead, she spoke about a mechanic and his daughter. She spoke about courage. She spoke about kindness. And she reminded people that the most valuable gifts in life aren't measured in dollars. They are measured in compassion. The truth is that every person you meet is fighting a battle you cannot see. Some are carrying fear. Some are carrying grief. Some are carrying loneliness. A smile, a kind word, or a moment of understanding can make all the difference. Rachel's life changed because a single dad mechanic chose to care. Daniel's life changed because Rachel chose to give back. And it all began with one simple act of kindness. So wherever you are today, remember this. You don't need to be rich to change someone's life. You don't need fame, power, or influence. You only need a caring heart. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the greatest gift another person will ever receive. And when kindness spreads from one heart to another, it has the power to change the world.